and welcome to the Winners Find a Way show. I am your host, Trent Clark. Welcome back. Always good to see you on a Friday, or our new time, actually. We're now doing Thursday mornings, which I'm super excited about. I am the CEO of Leadership, a serial entrepreneur and entrepreneur organization member. I am a global speaker, having spoke and delivered in over 17 countries. And most people know me because I have coached in the professional baseball for over 13 years, coaching in 3 World Series. And I am also the new author of Leading Winning Teams. Super excited about that book. Rolled out August 20th. You will have to go pick it up. It is down in the link in the chain. Go get it. We are offering a massive deal before the end of September. If you can get it, I hope you can get it in time. All the 8 hours of our book launch interviews and a signed copy of the book for only $35. It's an absolute steal of a deal. Today on the Winners Find a Way show, I welcome my man, Keith Sconiers. Keith, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. How you doing today, Trent?
Man, I'm doing so well. It's we're actually having fabulous weather in the north, man, and it lifts my spirit, man. You know how you get rainy days in Portland, and you're just like, oh my gosh, is the sun gonna shine or no?
The answer is always no. When it's It's like, and I know it's gonna rain because it's like I have this itching to go wash my car, and then as soon as I get out of the car wash, I feel like the clouds have come out and it starts raining. So.
Yeah. So, man, I am excited to have you, an entrepreneur, a storyteller, a catalyst. Man, you've been out there as a former college athlete for many years, creating value for other people in their businesses, in their way to improve themselves. And I love that. As a fellow coach, always looking for self-improvement. Offline, we talked about counseling and making our own personal lives better and things like that. Love it. You're a Fresno State kid. Fresno area, Fresno, Cali, but went to Portland State actually for hoops. And then got out of Portland State and did the world tour of bounce around, and then we're going to talk about that. And then settled in the payment system, settled in a nonprofit, developed some things, and still in PaySuite and consulting in the payment area, as well as training and development. So pretty cool run here. And you work with a lot of former athletes as they figure out what's next after sport. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
So married now, met her over at AT&T, which is impressive. Mm-hmm. There's probably a story behind that. Like, did she fix your cell phone, or did you buy it from her?
Yeah, no, she didn't. She was like next in line to help me when I walked in, and unfortunately, she had like a customer who walked out when I walked in, and he came running back in when I came in. So she had to help him, and it was kind of interesting because we saw each other and started flirting right away, and she was helping someone else, and her colleague was helping me, but she and I couldn't stop talking in between me getting my phone taken care of. So it was fun.
Yeah, perfect. Yep. Kismet. Mm-hmm. So, all right, and you have a 14-year-old son. Is he going to play hoops? Because I know he's playing football right now.
I don't know. Probably not. I don't know. You never know. You never know with these things. Even the football thing came out of nowhere for us. So I don't know. As long as he's happy and having a good time, we want him to play whatever he wants to play. So hopefully it'd be cool to, see him dunk on a couple of people. He's tall enough now, and so that would be cool. But we don't know yet.
Yeah. How tall are you now, Keith?
I'm 6'6".
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. You don't look that tall sitting down, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I mean that's why I sit down. I think it's about making people feel comfortable, and
I appreciate that.
Welcoming presence.
I should tell people that's why I sit down, because I'm a foot shorter. I'm a foot shorter than that, and I just don't want to intimidate people with my 5'6". I tend to run up on people, and I appreciate that. Maybe they're worried about me biting their ankles, Keith. I don't know. So we're having opposite challenges, but either way, maybe we should both just stay seated. All right. All right. So what most people don't know about Keith Sconiers as a well-regarded collegiate athlete is your first name's Thomas.
Yeah. The cat's out of the bag. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So, it's funny. You don't have it on anything. Do you have to
Yeah.
have it on your ID so you can get on a plane?
Yeah.
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 But otherwise, people don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah. People don't know. Yeah.
Right. The hidden thing about Keith Sconiers, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was your ID going, oh, this is a fake.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's totally a fake. Yeah. And I don't know. The more people I talk to, they're like, "Yeah, I don't think you look like Thomas anyway." I'm like, "Yeah, I agree, 100%."
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. I don't know if
Yeah.
I look like a Trent. I don't know what a Trent looks like because there wasn't very many, man, when I was growing up. And
Yeah.
of course, there's a lot biblical, right? There's a lot of Thomases. That's
Yeah.
a
There are.
common name, and um, Keith less so. But I've known a few Keiths here and there
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about, man, like, you're a guy who's kind of hitting on cylinders, right? You're a good high school player. You get signed to go to college to play basketball. You're going to play at Portland State. Grew up in Portland too?
No, I grew up in Fresno, so I
Oh, that's
was
right. Oh,
in.
yeah, yeah, right. So
Yeah.
Fresno. So
Yeah.
this is what took you to
Yeah.
Portland. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're in a new spot, and are you thinking like, hey, going to be the big man on campus, and this is going to be like the Keith show? They'll probably name it Keith State by the end of your 4-year tenure. Or what are you thinking when you hit college?
Yeah. I want to go back and say yes, I did grow up in Portland because I think that we grow up twice,
Mm,
right? We have our formative years where we grow up in our under the leadership of our guardians, our parents or grandparents or whoever it is. And that's growing up, but then when you leave and you go off to college somewhere and you're responsible for everything that happens and the buck stops with you you actually have to go through another growing up process. And so yeah, I did grow up in Portland, and I think that everything happened so fast with me starting to play basketball when I was a sophomore in high school that I don't know that I expected to be the man on campus, but I certainly wanted to contribute at a very high level. And I would say that even though my work ethic was there, I wouldn't say that the experience was there as a player. And there's a lot of things that I really needed to learn or would have needed to learn to be able to contribute at the level that I wanted to contribute. And that's not what actually happened. So yeah.
mm. Yeah, I like that tale of two cities right there, right? Being a fellow college athlete and going away to school, I think there was, and I like the way you describe it, growing up under guardians and family and friends, parents, and people that know you very well. I went to a bigger city in Toledo, probably about the size of Portland,
Mhm.
and um, it was a very different environment, and now you're under the guidance of mentors and coaches, and some adults, a lot fewer,
Mhm.
and a lot less with intimate knowledge of you, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a very independent now of time to grow up. And I tell a lot of people who get somewhat intimidated by people with a university education. I'm like, listen, man, university education is a time where it's a midpoint of independence from home to how am I going to grow up to be a man or a woman in this world on my own. And there's a lot of boundaries, which is nice, but it's not easy. And you start finding out that you probably miss some skills along the way to prepare yourself.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of like, hey, how do I collaborate and work with other people? How do I get something done on my own? What resources do I have?
Mhm.
Like that I
Mhm.
can do stuff. So I think there's a lot of independent thinking at that age, that can go, by the way,
Yeah.
two ways, and rarely does it stay in the middle, right? I feel like
Yeah.
those university days were filled with some really good decisions and some
Mhm.
really bad ones.
Yeah. Certainly.
And it didn't feel
Certainly.
like there was a lot of middle of the road ones.
Yeah, seriously, including like in action, right? Like we may tend to think of the extremes in terms of like a really good decision and a really bad decision, but then there's also the non-decision, right?
Yeah.
Or the decision to like hang out in the dorm and
Yep.
not build relationships or not figure out how to improve relationships, right,
Yeah.
with people that you already have relationship with. And those are like non-decisions that I think can have pretty extreme outcomes.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Relationships is definitely part of that 4 year transition. I know we moved when my son hit his sophomore year in high school.
Hmm.
And, he was devastated. We were taken away from his four friends. This
Hmm.
is
Yeah.
not a guy with hundreds and hundreds of friends, right? It was
Yeah.
like, and it was kind of his core four. Like that's
Yeah.
cool, like you got your people, and that was going to be changing. And his core four was not a daily thing. His core four was a couple days a week, played some sports together and things like that, max,
Hmm. Yeah.
and still a pretty quiet, independent kid. And so one of his friends, after he kind of mulled around and played the victim card and woe is me and oh my gosh, my parents took me away. He's like, hey man, you're going to go to college in 2 years and the exact same thing's going to happen anyway. So you're just getting a precursor of how you build new relationships somewhere. And at that point, I saw him, get a little shift. We couldn't tell him that as parents, but his friend could.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, right? So one of the core four could. I would have put it in his ear a lot earlier to tell him had I known that was how I was going to have to go, right?
Right.
So let's talk about. I want to get into relationships with you because that's something a superpower of yours is helping teams build that, right? And you do some training and development with Catalyst around that. But I want to first start to go back to Keith coming out of college now.
Hmm.
You're coming out of Portland State, and you have 17 jobs in a decade.
Yeah.
Like, I've always told a lot of people, Keith, that I was a pretty crappy employee, which is why I own businesses, right? Like,
Yeah.
because I wanted to change everything, like right now, man. Like, why are
Yeah.
we doing it the stupid way? Why don't we do it like, I was not a fabulous employee. And I have to
Yeah.
admit that now of like, I didn't know it then. I just thought like I was trying to contribute more and more and push the envelope and help these organizations get better. And I certainly had a heart for improvement and a desire to have impact, but I probably went around about that in a very poor way. Is that fair?
Hmm. Yeah.
So I turned out that I thought maybe I shouldn't be an employee. So that's when I started buying companies and making decisions on the culture I wanted to devise and make. And it humbled me in a hurry about being an owner and being an employee and two different
Hmm.
things.
Hmm.
But walk us through what's going on with Keith that you're a highly respected athlete. You've got all sorts of skill set. You're educated. And what would be a reason why Keith Sconiers has to go through 17
Hmm.
career changes in 10 years?
Hmm. I would say it's because of relationship.
Okay.
And the reason why I would say that is because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know how I was going to get there. I didn't know what my core values were. I didn't know who I wanted my work to have its greatest like an impact on. I didn't know what I didn't know is
Mm,
why I had 17 jobs in 10 years. And when I talk about the power of relationship, which is a coaching experience I take people through, especially the former athletes that are wanting to get into these high reward type professions like real estate or investments or franchising or whatever it may be, I talk about relationship because the power of relationship, because it's really about the relationship with the person in the mirror. Right. And I did not have that, which is why I was afraid to transfer when I wasn't getting the playing time that I wanted to get as an athlete, or didn't have the courage to go to the coach and really have the conversation that I really needed to have. It was because I didn't have the courage. And that's because I didn't have a good relationship with the person in the mirror. Wasn't
mm,
really clear about what I was after. And so because of that, I ended up in a situation where I missed out on doing the planning that I needed to do prior to making the shift out of college. And this is coming from someone who obviously had a tremendous work ethic. I had torn an ACL my medical redshirt year. So I had a medical redshirt year, tore my ACL, came back in 4.5 months, right? Was at the weight room the day after surgery, went to all the classes I was supposed to go to, was essentially finishing school early. I finished most of my coursework in March of 2006 and immediately started working. But because I hadn't done the planning in terms of who I was, what I wanted, what my core values were, what my interests were, and what industries I might have gravitated towards, when the bills started coming, I started taking jobs just because they said they would hire you. And what I learned very quickly is that if they offer you the job on the first interview, it's probably not a good fit. Because
That's good advice.
right? Because no company is going to do that unless it's a sink or swim type environment where they plan on making $0 and zero time of investment in you as a professional.
They're showing their level of desperation.
Oh yeah, big time. We were the desperate meeting the desperate, right? It was like a match made in heaven. In hell, actually.
Yeah. Well, and so both of our strategies are hope. Man, I hope you can turn it around. I hope I'm in the right place, because you don't have a game plan, which is weird, because all this work you were doing, the knee, rehabilitation, you've got a game plan to be the best athlete. You've got a game plan to go on to the next level, like whatever it is, right? Be a starter. It doesn't matter what the goal. So you do understand how that works, and then it ends.
Yeah.
And now, like, you can't pick those key tools up, transfer them over here, and say, hey, how does Keith go about being career Keith? You don't know how to put that in and set that in motion at that point. Is that fair?
That's fair. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I never had a conversation about it at all. Wow. There was no conversation about, hey, what is Keith going to do now? Right? He's passing his classes. He's staying out of trouble. He's not the partying type or anything like that. He's a good kid. There wasn't, hey, what are you going to do now?
That throws me.
You help with anything?
Yeah. I remember there was a comedian back in the 80s, this woman, she was great. And she goes, you know why adults ask children what they want to grow up when, what they want to be when they grow up? They're looking for ideas. And I thought, like, yeah, that's fair. But I gotta think, and I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus here, man.
Yeah.
But I'm just hovering in from 10,000 feet. Okay. Let me come over Portland State at 10,000 feet. This is not a pipeline to the NBA. This is not a pipeline to pro sports. It's a nice school. It's got a good group of athletes. They're that second and third tier level at the university at the college age. It's awesome. Some good sports going on there. But these are not the feeder schools, right? There's a couple that come through and make it out. Great. So I thought this was university. I thought this is what they were doing, is prepping us for life. How did they miss that? Or were they doing it and you missed it?
No, I wouldn't say so. I would say that and here's my position on it, Trent. I think as parents, we shouldn't send our kids to college without a plan. Without the proper mindset to leverage and take advantage of the opportunity that it is.
Yeah.
It's not the basketball coach's responsibility to make sure I have a plan after college. It would be great if they facilitated that conversation.
I think.
But they also have a family, and they are also in the same situation that I am in as a student athlete, trying to figure out, how am I going to be as successful as I possibly can? And sometimes when you're focused on winning games, other things fall through the cracks, especially if you don't have the resources around you as a coach to make sure those things get addressed. And so I never want to paint the picture that my coaches were irresponsible for not having the conversation with me, because they were probably wrestling with the same thing I was wrestling with. Like, what's my next job? How am I going to feed my family, right? Or how am I going to feed
we all have plenty of things.
Yeah. And so I would say that the program probably didn't have the resources at the time to make sure that conversation was being discussed or brought up as an opportunity.
Well, I would also say, probably on my errors as your coach, Keith, if I was sitting in that era and I see you so focused on your work, I see you focused at practice, like, hey, I don't need to worry about Keith Sconiers. He's a focused guy. I'm sure he's got his next 10 years laid out after this. Like I
Exactly.
can imagine saying that in my mind about some
Yeah.
of the athletes I've coached.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. And they also could be under the assumption that the school is doing a good job in this regard. And hey, he's doing his senior capstone.
Yeah.
Apparently he has an idea
Yeah.
of what it's going to look like. And so, but the reality of it was that I did not have a plan, and I did not
Man.
know what was coming. And by the time, I think the quote is like, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, even those who have a
Mike
plan.
Tyson.
Yeah. Even when those who have a plan experience what it's like to step into the real world, it hurts. And if you don't have a
Mm.
rock solid plan, if you don't have relationships around you to hold you up when you feel like falling, then you're in for a rude awakening. And that's what I was in for as I stepped into looking for careers as a post collegiate Division 1 athlete.
Well, I like your quote about everyone should have a plan.
Yeah.
Parents, help your children get a plan before they go to college. Like, well, I'm going to go one past that, Keith, and I'm going to say my children shouldn't walk out the door without a plan. Like,
Yeah.
you have a foundation here we've established that around the church and who you are and who God says you are. That's how
Yeah.
my family works, and that's
Yeah.
just mine.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, but kids got to go find out. Like, wow, God says I'm this. Other people don't say that about me. Like, yeah.
Right.
No, that's right. Like, you're gonna find out. It can be cruel out there, right?
Yeah.
And you got to go and find out.
Yeah.
And I think that's right. I think the disservice that we do is everyone has a plan until they punch you in the nose, right?
Mhm.
Is to instill this belief in kids that, oh, no, you won't get punched in the nose. Oh, no.
Mm.
You're gonna get punched in the nose. Like, this is
Yeah.
gonna happen. It's not a if, it's a when.
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
and then even when it does, when it happens, it's like immediately you're like, I'm questioning my plan, right? Nothing says question my plan than blood coming out of your nose, right?
Yep.
Like, man, why am I in here, right?
Yep.
So you better be pretty rock solid on that plan, because when it gets happened, and as a strength coach and professional athlete, athletics and collegiately too, Keith, as you prepare your body for what's about to happen to the best of your ability.
Yep.
And then the first game comes in college, and the next day you're like, holy crap, my hamstrings are sore. Like, there's
Yep.
another level that happens in this game. And you're like, well, I practiced for it.
Mhm.
I did
Mhm.
all these things. I thought I was prepared. And you realize, man, that one, it may not happen after the first game. It may be the schedule, like it's 10 in the first 3 weeks. And you're like, we never played 10 in 3 weeks in high school. Like,
Mhm.
and this is a whole other level of intensity and. And
Yep.
so it's hard to get people ready physically, mentally, emotionally, and morally for what's about to happen at the top levels.
Yeah.
It's a big challenge, and any one of those four
Mhm.
will bring you down in a heartbeat.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah, it's like a house, and like, hey, here's our
Mhm.
four foundations, right?
Mhm.
And then we're like, hey, listen, I'm gonna pass on that moral one, and I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah.
that moral one kind of sits in the middle, and we keep trying to build,
Mhm.
and the thing keeps falling
Mhm.
in on us,
Mhm.
so we can't go up and
Mhm.
build the house without this
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I'm so glad
it's
you're
rough.
saying that. I'm so glad you're saying that, because that's a big piece in the power relationship. I talk about protecting your dreams, and it's all about that. I mean, if you watch the news today, there's billionaires being undressed in ways that we would have never thought, and they're losing
Yeah.
everything because they thought they could skip out on the moral part,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So it's
Yeah.
it's a key foundational element of being successful.
Yeah. I feel like it's my biggest concern with America right now. I
Mhm.
feel like trust and moral fabric is decaying fast.
Mhm.
And that's not what that's not what we were built on. Like
Yeah.
built on a bunch of risk and like, hey, let's all go in this together. It's not going to be easy, but we're all going to do this thing. And we're kind of like outliers
Mm-hmm.
and relying on one another, which takes a lot of trust to rely on one another, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what is so tough about a civil war back in those 1800s,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is like, oh my gosh, now we're going to divide this thing? Is that a good idea?
Mm-hmm.
Hold on. And so, man, I think like it's tough because you think like a guy like Lincoln, can he bring everybody together in a time where trust is low and we've got some decay in like moral fabric, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we're trying to get that right. The other thing I read the other day is like, the presidents that challenged the moral
Mm-hmm.
fabric,
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones who all got like
Mm-hmm.
shot at, right? These are the people that all
Yep.
went after a moral fabric and said, hey, the heart's not right. And they're like, we need to take them out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I find that very odd that people who pushed back saying we're going the wrong direction, there's a moral challenge here, are possibly up for assassination. Now, you think that's evil? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think what we can learn from it, because Martin Luther King
Yeah.
obviously was assassinated, right?
Yep. Another
Malcolm X.
guy
Yeah.
challenging the moral
Yeah.
challenging the moral compass of where we're at in this thing, man.
Yeah.
He goes,
Yeah.
this is all I want, man.
Yeah.
This is all I want is to
Yeah.
judge this thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Character.
And when people look at the story of Malcolm X, right, like his final days was spent challenging an organization that he was a part of, right? And I think in the Civil War, what we learned from that is that some things are worth dying for, right? And it's your values, it's your core values, right? And if you're not willing to risk whatever it takes to protect them, then they're probably not really yours, right?
Yeah.
And so,
I have found, I'd love to hear what you think about this. I love people. I find love's a strong word, and I should love people. Darn it, I'm a Christian, right? So
mm-hmm,
I find myself always respecting and admiring people that draw a line in the sand,
mm-hmm,
and I don't have to agree with it.
yeah,
Like I don't have to agree with their line. I just like, I love the story of John Wooden. You're a basketball
mm-hmm,
guy,
mm-hmm,
and do you know John Wooden at all from
yeah,
UCLA?
mm-hmm, yeah,
Right.
mm-hmm,
So recently, his center forever, Bill Walton, who just passed,
yeah,
God bless his soul. Um, he was a young upcomer in the 70s. He was just named the All-American of the Year, right? All-American
yeah,
team. They won a
yeah,
national championship, and he comes back in super 70s style with the beard and the
yeah,
hair and everything else. He's like, Coach, I want to wear my hair the way I want to wear my hair. And he's like, oh, that's good. Like, okay. He's like, we got standards here at UCLA, and those aren't the standards.
yeah,
You're going to cut your hair and you're going to shave your face if you're going to be on the team here at UCLA
yeah,
as
yeah,
a basketball player representing our university, right?
yeah,
And so he says, oh, come on, coach.
mm-hmm,
I believe it's the right thing to do. It doesn't have anything to do with, my character. I'm convicted on this. And he goes, man, I have a lot of respect for a man of his convictions.
yeah.
We're going to miss you here at UCLA. And I just, that's that line where you're just like, wait, what? I'm all American. Like, no, you can't get rid of me. And he's like, of course I can get rid of you. Like, I got 17 more high school kids who would love to play for the national championship team, right?
Yeah.
And he couldn't believe it. And coach is a time guy, right? Like the whole hour, people travel across the world to go to his practices, not the UCLA games, to watch Coach Spridden's 2-hour practice. So he's like, Bill, we're going to have this conversation 15 minutes. And so, till practice. And so he goes, come on, coach, you're not serious. He looks at him and goes, 14 minutes. You know,
Yeah.
and that's the
Yeah.
thing. He's like, he is serious, man. He
Yeah.
like tells the story about
Hmm.
getting on his bike, flying into Westwood, jumping in a barber chair, like cut it all off. And he's
Hmm.
like, yeah, I got back like 4 minutes late to practice and tried to slide
Hmm.
in the back, and coach never said
Hmm.
anything, thankfully, right?
Yeah.
But he came back with the hair right, and
Yep.
as the standard, coming back
Yep.
to meet the standard, right?
Yeah.
So the Yankees do it.
Hmm.
People have standards. We have things that have always, have stood the test of time on things, and yet there's things that I think have been very effective that we're now moving away from.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Morally, character, things that we always thought that was good and right, and I think we're
Yeah.
going away from it. So, what's your position on them? And when you talk about these things, these challenges that we face as leaders, what's your thought on it?
On which part?
Well, let's talk about the moral fabric. Let's talk
Yeah.
about that first. Is are we losing that? Has that been lost over the years?
Hmm. I think that we live in a time where everybody has a microphone. And so it can seem like we're losing our morals
Mm,
because we're hearing more voices. But I don't know the answer to that, Trent, because
mm,
I'm not the creator, and I can only take a guess at things. Um but I don't I don't know. If I can be honest, I don't know if we're going in the wrong direction morally because I see so many great examples of people stepping up and doing what's right and being there for people and caring for people and having conversations and making a positive impact on the world, right? And
mm,
so I don't I don't know. I think that there's always and has always been people who live a certain way and people who don't, right?
mm.
My favorite quote from my grandmother was like, "Baby, they killed Jesus." Now, if you ever look and think like we're going in the wrong direction,
Yeah, right.
right? Like
Like,
they would have been 2000
listen,
years ago. It's
yeah,
like it's downhill from here,
yeah.
like
None of us are really safe, right? Like,
yeah.
because if there was ever one,
You would talk
no,
about a
that's a good
bad
point.
day.
Well, and how I view that, if I go on those four fabrics, right?
Yeah.
If I go on, um, physical training, mental training, emotional training. I think these are things we've really studied. I think these are things we've really learned. I think these are things we've really put some attention on improving on. I mean, we can see it. I mean, like we see it in sports, right? Because
Mhm.
times of events, they get faster. We're getting
Yeah.
physically stronger, faster,
Yeah.
better, right? The emotional component is now a whole new tie-in, and that's had
Mhm.
2 decades of fabulous research and more. But it's really hit the stride the last 2 decades. The mental training, is definitely so. So I see these other three categories going up. I feel like that fourth category of moral is going the wrong direction. I don't think we're improving that side. That's
Here's
my view. I can be wrong.
yeah.
It's just my
Here,
view.
yeah, here's what I'll say about that. I remember sitting in um, I was at like a national convention for like a direct sales company, probably, I don't know, 15 years ago. Because I got
Yeah.
involved in direct sales when I first got out of college, and it was really transformative in terms of from a personal development standpoint. I remember a speaker standing up and saying, all it takes for the evil forces in our universe to take over, all it takes is for enough good people to stand by and do nothing. And so
Mm,
I would say for the people that are concerned about where we are morally, is I would ask them like, who are you mentoring right now? Who are you
mm,
influencing? Who are you helping? Who are you having a meal with for the first time? Who are you stepping out and, reading a positive word with, reading scripture with? Who are you leaning into? What are you doing outside of just going to work, right? And taking care of your family. And I understand that we all have our responsibilities at home. I'm a family man as well, but I would say that if we are concerned, we as athletes, we don't sit back and say we're losing the game and just do nothing. As
Right.
athletes, we sit, we collectively come together and say, hey, this isn't going well. What do we need to do? And then we get back out on the floor and we go play. And so I would say, for the people that are concerned about where we are morally, I would say, you know, who are you building relationships with, and who are you helping get move forward in life? Because that's how people learn morals, is through relationship, right? And if we
Yeah.
allow relationships to continue to be fractured, then we're part of the problem
Yeah.
when we could be part of
So
the solution.
yeah, I think that's good. I mean, I think that that's the name of the show, right? I love the quote from the Four Disciplines of Execution. Winners when shown data that they're losing,
Yeah,
find a way to win.
yeah,
I mean, that's who I surround myself with, right? And it's very
hmm,
important that I've got people who also believe they're going to take action and do something.
yeah,
There's nothing more frustrating in my world to see the data that we're losing and have a team that I'm working with or around that will take a losing behavior, which is one of four typically happen. They blame why we're losing. It's
hmm,
Trent's fault. It's Bill's fault. It's Diana's fault. It's whoever, right? And then they're gonna go like, hey, or they're gonna make excuses. That's number two, excuses of why we're losing. Let's all discuss about why we lose.
yeah,
They're gonna quit.
yeah,
Like I see this in young people like more than I should. I don't know if that's always happened, but the quitting, it's hard, and I'm just gonna quit because it's
hmm,
hard. And or one of the ones that I call the ostrich method, and I see it from time to time, is ignoring the data. So we're gonna just keep doing the same things and just ignore the data that we're losing.
yeah,
Now we're gonna stay busy, that's for sure, but
yeah,
don't expect a lot of improvement, right? Let's talk about these relationships to wrap this thing up, man. I
yeah,
mean, you're a purpose-driven guy. You're very focused in your life about taking on organizations that you're going to do some catalyst work with that are purpose-driven themselves. They're not
yeah.
just willy-nilly, yeah, we're about making money. Like
Hmm.
hopefully they do make money. Margin still matters,
Wow,
right? But
absolutely,
but
absolutely.
purpose-driven is probably something more than that, than to create, wealth for some individual. So how do these relationships play out that you're driving for?
How do they play out?
What are you looking for in how are relationships affecting the teams that you're working with that need to get that alignment? They need to move into those, as you talked about, um, values, core
Hmm.
beliefs, alignment on what this organization is doing, what the purpose of this organization is doing.
Hmm.
How are those relationships both adding
Hmm.
and subtracting from that organization?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that inspired me to go down this path of focusing on purpose with entrepreneurs specifically was because of the problems I was seeing in the workplace. Sometimes it's a restaurant owner who can't focus on other aspects of the business because they're carrying so much of it, to the common business advisor, a business coach. It's like, oh, you need to scale, you need to hire, you need to outsource. But what I found was that that business owner's inability to let things go had to do with a deeper issue, right? It didn't have to, they already had employees that they could have handed projects off to, right? But they didn't have the level of trust with that employee, or that employee didn't trust them, or didn't have the ability to build a quality relationship to where they could be on common ground from a leader to manager type relationship. And so how it's playing out is really by helping the entrepreneur get clear about who they are, what they want, what their core values are, and then giving them language that allows them to communicate with that team member in a way that is digestible, right, to that team member, right? Oftentimes we're actually in a transitional phase from a leadership standpoint in our world where we can't really lead people the way that we used to lead people. And the reason why we can is because, when you talk about values, 50 years ago, what it meant to go to work as a man means something completely different than what it means today. I went to
Mm,
work 50 years ago because it was the right thing for my family. And I was willing to do whatever it took. And I was willing to go through whatever it took to make sure my family had food on the table, to make sure my kids ate, to make sure that my kids had clothes for school, that we had a safe car. All of those things were baked into what it meant to be a man. Today, that is not the case. And people work for a different reason. And so because it's different now, we actually have to lead different now. We have to be able to have that deeper conversation of the reason and purpose those employees are coming to work. We have to be able to hold that conversation so that we can lead, we can hand off projects to our employee. But when we don't have the ability to have those conversations, I think the quote is if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And if
yeah.
everything looks like a nail, then you have a turnover issue. You have a morale issue. If you have a morale issue, then you have a client engagement issue because clients clients that are engaged because they're communicating with a staff that's engaged,
Mm.
right? But if a staff isn't engaged, it likely has to do because the leader isn't engaged or is not engaging. And if they're not engaging, could it be because everything looks like a nail? Could it be because they want to do the right thing, but they don't know how to communicate the right things?
I mean, I
So,
see communication being one of the biggest challenges today in the market. Like,
mhm,
and there's so many more mediums, right? There's so many
mhm,
more communication. I'm dealing with this now about people messaging me on WhatsApp,
mhm.
Facebook, LinkedIn, like email,
Yeah,
telephone,
yeah,
text. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'd have to
yeah.
check like 40 different devices to get all my messages every day.
Mhm,
And then I take some heat, right? Keith, like, hey,
mhm.
you didn't get back to me, Trent. I messaged you on some unknown app I've never downloaded on my phone. And I'm like, oh man, sorry, like,
Yeah,
sorry I missed it, man. So what do you think about not only the communication, but it's a generational gap in communication too, as
mhm.
people young grew up communicating different ways because of the digital era.
Yeah,
And now their managers might be 45 to 55 and they
mhm.
didn't grow up communicating like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's the reality that we live in as leaders and entrepreneurs, and we have to figure out a way to bridge that gap, whether that be looking at how we're hiring, who we're hiring, being aware of what the skill set our team possesses is and represents, so that we can have the right people on the team to help with that communication, right? Like there's ways to make sure that these things happen, whether it be through how we hire in HR or even how we schedule time with our core leaders to make sure that everyone's on the same page and communicating and getting the information. I think that as organizations, I've certainly experienced this when I was an employee, where it was just like it was all distribution, right? It was all here's what's happening, here's what's going on. There's a lot of communication, but there was never any, hey, what are you seeing out there as, on the floor as you talk with customers? There was no listening. What are you concerned with? What are you wrestling with? It was all top down communication and nothing, what I had to say didn't matter, right? And so I think that it's important to communicate, obviously, but it's important to communicating isn't always distributing information. It's also
Mm.
asking for information and data so that we can collectively as a team make better decisions.
Yeah. Well, I've always said the best leaders ask the best questions.
Yeah.
And for another great episode of Winners Find a Way, man. Thrilled to have you, Keith, on here, man. Keith is probably also going to join us on NIL for You on the podcast there. We're excited about that. A college athlete who went through it. Now it's very different going through college
Yeah.
now, given the NIL era, very entrepreneurial environment now.
Hmm.
And so you can also probably catch him over there soon. And for Keith, challenging times right now. What would you say to anyone who's going through one of those challenging times in their life? What would you think the core focus would be for someone?
I would say, and I've experienced this, is if you're going through a tough time, I would try to make sure you buy a journal and write down what your top challenges are right now.
Yeah.
Next, you want to find people who have been through what you're going through right now. Sometimes that's through support groups, sometimes that's through just people that are in your network. And you
Mentor.
want to, yep, a mentor, absolutely. And sometimes it's not official, right? Like sometimes people say, "Oh, I got to find a mentor," and so we start interviewing people and putting the
Yeah.
pressure on. I
Yeah.
think it's more about like, hey, build a relationship, find
Yeah.
people that are living the way that you want to live, that have maybe been through some of the things that you've been through, that you can build a relationship with and have some form of communication with. And then the last thing I would say, I would say, find a way to serve. One of the
Mm.
best days I ever had was I was going through a divorce. I was at the lowest point in my life, and it was during Thanksgiving, and I was alone. I was depressed, I was in pain, but I went and served food that day to the homeless, right? I got to volunteer at the
Yeah.
church to serve food. And I just remember that day. I just remember just feeling really good that day, and I would say find a way to serve. There's somebody out there that is going through something that needs your help. And as low as you feel, there's somebody that feels lower. So go be part of making sure that they have a better day, and you'll have a better day in the process.
I love that. I think that I've never found a way to feel bad about myself while serving others.
Yeah.
So it's great advice. Thank you, Thomas Keith Sconiers. There you go.
There
Like,
we go.
in the house. Like, yeah, for
Thanks,
everybody
Trent.
else, thank you for joining us on the Winning Winners Find a Way show. You can check out the book, Leading Winning Teams. That's on all. I'll have it in the tag below. You can pick up that book on all the major networks, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So check it out. We are moving Winners Find a Way to Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. Check us out then. New time, same great content. Check it out. So thank you to Keith Sconiers. We'll see you next time. Winners